Linda, who drifted from Yamaka all the way to Andros. They might have landed near Bamsey. And I was able to split the wood by hand, and he and I scull our way in. At 96, that's how strong he was. He used to always walk around with a bougainvillea, a little flower in his mouth, and so proud. And we scull our way in. And I think my grandpa, Bishop Henry Butler at that time, said, boy, you break the mystique. That's what he called it, because boats at that time couldn't get into the channel. It was so shallow there, but we walked that boat, and you can imagine when it's time we could reach, then they start holding the rope and walking it in, and we scull. I mean, when you reflect about the times, they're precious. 2 weeks ago at St. Paul's Baptist Church, after church service, and she understand me using the child analogy. I was talking with my mom and some other people, and my aunt was standing a little ways off, just like a child, like when adults have a conversation, a child will patiently wait. They old school, they have manners. And when I finished talking with my mom, she said, I came to you because I want you to take me fishing. And I said, Auntie, I ain't doing you no favor. You're doing me a favor. On Tuesday past, 2 Tuesdays ago, the first Tuesday in February, I had to take my car to get fixed. Something painted in the guy said, I'll have to keep your car from that morning. You get it back 2 o'clock. So I was home. When the wife was going to work, I say, you know something? I say, drop me out here and I can go out. I could walk back home. But if I see the bonefish out there, I can call you. And I want you to call Aunt Hazel, grab her and bring her back quick. And I reach out there and I saw some of the bonefish. So I catch the crabs and stuff, and I call and say, get Aunt Hazel, get here quickly. And Hazel came there, and we set the rods. To make a long story short, because I'm going to post the videos on Facebook, my Aunt Hazel, y'all need to zoom in this, my Aunt Hazel landed a 30-inch bonefish. A 30-inch bonefish. And anybody who's a bonefish enthusiast know that. And that was so priceless to me. And it's bigger than the ones I caught. I used to brag about catching the 20-inch ones and stuff, and she'd come right there and just shatter it. And the bonefish was about over 5 inches thick. And it's special times like these when we see things like our 60% of our farmers being over 60 and so on and so forth, that intergenerational transmission and those links that we should have with our elders, we need to find a way to transfer that knowledge. If not, we'll create a break in our natural cycle of life, and it will cause a deficiency that the nation will pay for later on. And so with that, I open this portion up. And I would add that as it relates to the Bamsey program, I've probably been through every nook and cranny of Bamsey myself. The 12 Bahamas Scout Group in Foxhill, even as a parliamentarian, I used to make the time, and we go 10 days every Easter to go camping in Rock Sound. We sleep in the bushes on the rocks. My job is to get all the food, fishing, and training them. And this exciting thing, the last time we went before COVID, we went to Andros. And we had a wonderful time there, and we also took them to Bamsey. I, too, am a farmer. Persons know me mainly for my beekeeping, 242 bee masters, and had opportunities where persons from Bamsey had called me one time saying they had a couple of beehives and they were so aggressive and nobody could approach them. I said, really? And out of my own experience, I went there, take a look at it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Throughout Bamsey. So anybody in Andros see those little small brown box hanging in trees? They are some of my swarm traps I would have put there. They're probably dilapidated by now. I was impressed by how Bamsey was and what it was doing and how it was developing, even then and now. And I'm grateful for what I've been hearing basically in the both upper and lower house as to relate to the importance of ensuring that this institution functions, runs on all cylinders for the benefit and the good of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And I stand fully behind that. It is important to have the kind of education, research that you would have with institutions such as Bamsey, because I thought about many calamities we've had and hurricanes we've had where farmers would have lost a lot of their lemon trees. And that was done simply because some purchaser went and purchased a batch of lemon trees that was grown from cuttings. And so because they weren't grown from seeds, they had no tap roots. So they looked sexy and they looked good, but when the wind came and the storm came, the trees were all level because they didn't have tap root. And I hope that that would have taught some persons a lesson. I say that in the context of the need for agricultural knowledge, best practices, and innovation. It is amazing. The Bible spoke about how the desert would bloom, and you see that right now. One of the world net importers of largest importer of flowers and citrus is Israel, and they grow that right in the desert. And we have the superabundance of land. We must be able to demonstrate to our young people how effective farming could be, how therapeutic it could be, and how wonderful it is. I'll be remiss if I don't mention the backyard farming group that we had started in the Parliamentary constituency, which is a spin-off from, well, my life work in that regard, and how they are still going very, very strong. And I always marvel at the amount of crops that they actually can produce. And so with that said, I sat here today and I started looking through and listening to the contributions, in particular that of Senator Young. And I listened to him very, very intently because he was on a very, very good wicket. And I'm going to address some of those matters, but I intend to end on the heart of the matter for me. I had wished that certain things don't arise because Bamsey has had a rough growing up. I've heard in the other place, and it's rightfully so, members of the opposite saying how Bamsey is their child and so on and so forth, and that is proper. But in school, I studied child and adolescent psychology, and in that, we learned that within the first 5 years of an adolescent's life, the character and the function of that child is actually formed. And so how the child is treated basically will determine its direction. I think the scripture said, we train up a child the way it should go, and when it's old, it will not depart for it. I am glad that there had been some corrections from Bamsey, and I say wholeheartedly, I am confident that Senator Hepburn will, with her charge, take Bamsey to a whole new level. I am saying that not only because I believe it and hoping on it, but I want to look her in the eye and say I'm counting on it. The Senate is supposed to be a place for elder statesmen. And it is unfortunate sometimes when we go there. The thing, but when you go there, it creates a chain reaction, whereas someone else got to go there. We've had some nice debates in here, whereas we basically kept above God. But because we reached a place called there, I think I need to touch on some things in that regard and then speak to one of my salient points in the context of the rearing of Bamsey. Senator Young showed some very interesting photos, and it was his desire and effort to speak about the negative things or the lack of things that would have occurred, positive things that would have occurred at Bamsey at the hands of the former administration. Notwithstanding that, as we all well know, about 2 years of our life and even some things, productivity had been reduced as a result of COVID. Those who don't want to acknowledge it at home, listen carefully to them. They certainly are acknowledging it globally. And I want to say, aren't we a part of the globe? Where even farming had been impacted and a whole series of things. Bamsey as an educational institution would have been impacted. Even works that are supposed to have been done by the Public Works, Ministry of Public Works had been impacted. There have been times with the Ministry of Public Works, and I noticed as an MP trying to get certain things done, the road repaved and so on and so forth, but they were scheduled, when one person caught COVID and the whole department was out. And that impacted greatly the Ministry of Public Works. But a lot had been done with Bamsey throughout. And so I sat down with and even up until recently, and I literally interrogated Mr. Carlton Boleg, the permanent secretary who was charged with Bamsey, so that we can get some things right. And I say, bro, I can quote you. What's the deal with this? What's the deal with that? What's the deal with this? Because I need to know exactly what's going on. And I'm not interested in clippings. I want to know exactly what's going on. And I touched base with a few persons from the board. I want us to understand that from the formation of BAMSI, and first of all, let me give credit to the Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie. I'm going to say some things that may seem a little bit off, but I want to say that it is absolutely not in disrespect. Because I personally believe that certain men are of a certain ilk, and when it's time for them to row, Prime Minister Ingram, Minnis, and now Davis, they could do that. I look at myself as a child, and there's always a level of respect. So if I do speak to them, I will only speak as a matter of fact, but still not failing to acknowledge that, listen here, only few people have ever been prime minister, just like only few people have been governor general. So it's not meant as an insult, but it is a matter of a fact. So we could appreciate. The former prime minister, and this is how God works, he was at one point in time the Minister of Agriculture, and I would have heard many times this in the other place, where there were debates about even his tenure in agriculture, and some raised the issue of the tragedy of the horses dying and animals dying and so on and so forth and everything else. But yet, in the heart of a man of that much experience, and I would equate him to Pharaoh in this context, that when God wanted to do something, he gave Pharaoh a dream. Pharaoh had a dream that he himself could not execute, and he brought a Joseph in to execute it. But it was the dream that Prime Minister Christie had that he wanted to do this thing called BAMSI. And that dream is still here today, and it is a right dream. And even right now to this day, I would say, and permit me to call you Joseph, we are still looking for the Joseph to take on that dream, to be able to feed God's people and bring us through whatever periods that we need to do. You follow what I'm saying? So Pharaoh don't have to be perfect, but God can still speak to who he wants to. And sometimes to get it done, he speaks through leaders. The problem is when the plan began to develop, obviously you have trusty people you expect to do certain things. And I'm glad that the dream is still on today. BAMSI was first envisioned to cost about, 13 million. And by the time they ended that administration, I think it's fair to say that the cost overruns took it up to over $100 million. So over $100 million from the time the vision was birthed. I think that's in part because the leader, meaning Perry Gladstone Christie, believed in it. And obviously you don't expect a prime minister to micromanage things. And he wanted to keep it alive. And it's still something I believe that Bahamian people like myself believe in as well. But there were tremendous cost overruns. We see, as evident in this very, very bill, that BAMSI itself was not even properly structured. So here it is, $100 million was pumped into something that wasn't properly structured. Again, was it Pharaoh's fault? Pharaoh had the vision. He said, listen, Joseph, I'm going to put this ring on you. You make this happen. The structure should have been put in place, and we're here right now. I'm glad that it's coming up so early because it was one of the things that was being done through the former administration, and it is now coming to fruition. And for the good of the Bahamian people, I give God the glory for this. It needs to be done. Without the formal structure, it had actually been hindering the progress of BAMSI. It even hindered the level of accountability that all of us on every side would think any institution should have. Because it has been established that up until the time that the former administration had appointed a board, that there was no board meetings, definitely no record of any board meetings or minutes in that regard. I know under the current to-be president with her scholarship and everything else, that not only will that not happen, but I am confident it will go to a whole new level. Because one of the deficiencies that BAMSI had was really unqualified executives when it originally started. We could probably understand that from a political perspective when you bring a lot of people in and you're just really getting them in and giving them opportunities. But when you're pumping something into that, you need to make sure the expertise are in place. and most definitely from the hierarchy who have to manage that across the board. And so now we finally seen this come into place. And that very same lack of structure actually stunted the growth of BAMSI, so much so that the $100 million investment and the use thereof is almost akin to sucking a young plant dry before it really takes root. BAMSI is like a tree. And of every tree, a mango tree, when you plant it, you expect to have a harvest of it soon where you can reap off the tree. But there's a stage in that tree life where you just got to pump into it, set it up right, trim it, hedge it, and make it grow. BAMSI had that stunted growth initially, but I'm glad that it's sufficiently young in a stage that it was caught out of the former administration, and I know it's going to a high level in this administration, that things of the past will be lessons learned, and things of the past will not happen again. So with that in mind, one of the things that we need to do, and I'm not interested in all the rob or the burning down and the BAMSI thing and so on and so forth and all that other different stuff. I think it's still important that in this age, and I'm saddened because I asked, why didn't the former administration why didn't our administration do a forensic audit of BAMSI so we could have an understanding and a better understanding of what was and what couldn't have been done. The response I got was, in a sense, I could sort of understand it. When we hit in the COVID time, we started cutting back on so much things that was really too expensive at that time. But we really need to be able to see, even if only for future examples, exactly what happened. Because some of the things that I have heard have been rather scandalous. And I've heard some persons who are now basically dying and $3 million on foundations and different things. And I'm saying this simply because, yes, we have to be accountable for public funds. And yes, we don't want it to be repeated again. Now, some people may want to use it for their political whipping stone. The fact is, it's done. We ain't throwing away BAMSI. It was and it is an idea whose time has come. It had come then, it had come last term, and it still has come now. But we still have to look at it so we don't have those things. And some of the stories I've heard from reliable sources had been horrific. And that would be, to me, a valuable forensic audit for us to have. Because after $100 million and we came in, we found that, for example, the cafeteria wasn't finished. I think the cafeteria is now finished. It didn't finish? Come on, I'm going to go through this. They did work on the cafeteria? Oh, no, we're not talking about electricity. I'm going to look at electricity in a different batch. But the cafeteria, the cafeteria there, they didn't hook up electricity.
Please address the chair.
Okay. All right. They did work with the classrooms that was done. The administration building, that's all right. The female dorms is there. Obviously, nobody going to touch that male dorm no time soon, because we understand that. There was a new parking house put in place at that time on this administration. The lecture theater needs to be done in BAMSI. We spoke to male dorm. The parking lot at the time they came in was a dilapidated state. The parking lot is okay. It's okay now. Building houses for the animals, a lot of that was completed. Remember, because during Matthew there was a storm and it damaged that, and they did some more things during that time. As related to farming equipment, they got forklift, they got a brand new tractor, and some things. And obviously, in a situation the size of BAMSI, equipment is never complete. But I find it interesting when I looked at Senator Young's photo that he presented of the tractor when he spoke about because he raised it, the 8 tractors that is involved. What I got as related to those tractors were that 6 of them were the tractors that was before under the previous administration. And we know how it is in farming all around this country. Maintenance, that's why when I use the word government, that wasn't even pleasant. Government is lousy with maintenance. That's why putting BAMSI under his own thing is going to prevent that when you still have something that is still tied to the umbilical cord of the consolidated fund and all that stuff. Man, we know. Let's be real, we know. And the problem with those ones were a lot of them, I'm told the word was used that were basically them and they keep breaking down. And at a point in time, even if they run in now, as Senator Young stated, and I have no reason to disbelieve him, trust me, it was chronic. And if you check the maintenance log on that, you can realize at some person in time you get tired pumping money in that tractor, you just say, you know what, stay over there. And there was bought a new John Deere tractor. That was the tractor he showed in the photo. Yeah. Like I say, you can never have enough equipment for the size of BAMSI. And so a new John Deere tractor was acquired. And it was interesting because under the former administration, BAMSI had a tractor in Long Island. And I'm not saying that former administration did something, but nobody know where it's going because somebody's saying it's theirs. So this is why these things need to be checked on. Just simply so that the record of the institution will know that, like the Holocaust Memorial, we ain't going back there. We're going to a higher, loftier goal in BAMSI, which again, I state that I do believe the current senator will help take us in that direction. At that time when the mission came in, the electricity for all the new business of the campus is non-existent. And guess what? They still got an electricity problem. But what had happened was a contract was issued and that was done under the Ministry of Public Works. And I heard the Minister of Public Works in the other place acknowledge that will be finished shortly. Let me explain why the shortly. It was done under the Ministry of Public Works. And as I said earlier, especially during COVID, there was always shutdowns in the Ministry of Public Works. And so my understanding was that the completion time is literally but 3 weeks away. But guess what government can do? It must be a year or 2 years, can finish something that needs 3 weeks worth of work to finish. But the work had been progressing with electrification. But even when you install and connect those buildings in BAMSI, what needs to be done, that still ain't fix the problem because the grid needs to be upgraded in that area. So as I would have said on previous contributions, sometimes we need to, I say you gotta like it, but appreciate the processes which needs to happen in order for things to be able to brought about, even the sewage. When this administration came in, sewage was popping up and beating them to the face, and I think that is not even finished. Kurt, Honorable Senator, I pray for you. For you, I am praying. The roads in BAMSI, and I know because I've been through all of them, through all the bushes, I could tell you the problem BAMSI have with the fire ants and certain quadrants of it and so on and so forth, with the little ponds out there. I've been through every inch of that. All right? Foxville boy me, even though I was an MP, I'm a work boot and I've been up through and down through all of that. The roads got paved along BAMSI and there was many streets because you need that for the proper movement and flow of the equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And then there were lightings that was installed, which is why solar lightings that was installed around the perimeter. When the Effingham administration came in, BAMSI had a $750,000 a year security contract to secure the premises. $750,000 security contract. Interesting. What happened under the chairman, under Mr. Carlton Bowleg, they brought in a police officer, took some of the farm workers, and let the police officer train them to be security, and the same security they're on the payroll of the school right now. So guess what that meant? $750,000, well, let's say $700,000 saved because they get paid something. Simple, brilliance, and guess what? That's what you're going to bring to the table because efficiency in growing is just like life. Growing children is just like farming. Administration is just like farming. Christ, going to heaven is just like farming. When Jesus gave about the sower and over when he speak about the shepherd and the good shepherd. And these are the problems that we find. Administratively, BAMSI had a lot of struggles in that regard. And I guess there was a lot of zeal, and I still call for that forensic report just so we could get a grip. Because I'm sure going forward, as we would have started, every dollar gonna have to be justified. Because, and I don't say this as a political cliche because today is a different day. And you have different people with different skill set. And I'm hoping that some of the old mentality and political approaches would have been done away with the new cadre of people coming in. Because I did not come into politics to be the same old like somebody else. I come to bring to the table what God has enabled me to bring in such a time as this. And as long as we appreciate who we are and what we bring to the table, that would be the paradigm shift that we need. Instead of, yes, respect the old, but there are a lot of things, even our parents, all political fathers did that we don't need to be doing. Any which way across the board. Administratively, when they came in, BAMSI did not, the people didn't have their job descriptions. There was no real structure to the organization. And that is telling simply because of where we are right now. And as it relates to this intervention, actually under our last budget, if I'm correct, it was $8 million that was allocated for BAMSI that we didn't even have a chance to fully use because, COVID sucked the wind out a lot of that and a lot of stuff you didn't have to pay. When BAMSI, when we came into office in 2017 as related to BAMSI, and we're talking about the issue of productivity and also morale, because Senator Young brought it up, saying the morale is so devastating and all that. Well, it is what it is, but you know what? All of us who've been in politics and know what it is to lose an election, Mr. Alkeida said that with me and you, we know how it is for everybody to tell you they're voting for you. And then they reach back there, and then they go to the next person and say, boy, I want Michael Alkeida and Ruben, but they ain't do me nothing. But must see every fridge, ham, turkey, every uniform in the house come from you. That's why, when people come to me with careless role, I say, stop your foolishness, because the same way you treat him, you're going to treat me. And I tell them up front, so they don't ever come across that. And sad to say, they didn't even know me. And Kayla Sherwood actually was in college. At one point in time, Baptist Trainers College, he was track athlete and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. Even though we be doing engaged, we were in at least someplace at the same time. I always believe, if you date a girl who abused her last husband and you think you win something, you straight. If you date a man who's been abusing his wife and you happy because you get him, you watch what you get. So we need to be very, very careful. And I do believe as a government, especially in things as potential rich as BAMSI, we must learn to accentuate the positives and eliminate the negative, because our people are hearing us, and our biggest job ain't dumping money into BAMSI. Is to motivating our young people to fill that age gap and to get involved in farming. And the most we could accentuate and elevate the debate as relates to this, and as the Minister of Agriculture said, correct, make it sexy for them, then things could happen. Sakis Ismailian, who is responsible for the largest development in the history of this country. The Ismailians, when you go check them back, are peanut farmers. I guess I speak to the Rasta Collective who on Fire Trail Road area and say, y'all need to think about that. That's the history of that family. And their generations now had their hands in multi-billion-dollar development. We need to not get to the point where we despise the food that we need. Actually, quite frankly, we need to understand the value of it, because quite frankly, who actually hold your country's energy and your country food got your country by the throat. I would have when I looked at you, but I looked at Honorable Michael Alkeida, and Jesus came back into my heart. If I had looked at Senator Pistock, I would have used a colloquialism that is most appropriate. I love you, Senator Pistock, and I pray for you often, lest I say, yeah, no, because food security is critical. Back to the example of Perry Gaston Christie in the context of Pharaoh and whoever controls BAMSI in its original and spirit intent, being Joseph. This is what we need in time, in good times and when bad time comes. But we must appreciate the road that we have been treading. When I look at it again, and I heard Senator Young begin to speak, and and switch into a whole bunch of things with nothing been done, so on and so forth. And I watched the photos. I do a lot of my own construction, home, my roof, and everything. I build. I love working with my hand. I got that from my grandfather. And I saw him sending his before and after photo, and all I saw was sheetrock and paint. And I said to the young, I said in my heart to the young fella, I said, bro, I got paraphrase Senator Henfield, and quote Kenny Rogers, it's time enough for counting when the deal is done. Let's know when to hold out, know when to fold up, know when to walk away, know when to run. All right? Because when you have something that had a cost overrun from $13 million to $100 million, and you come here saying, look what we do, we paint this room and we do this, and I outline into you, who been to Bamsey all this time, because you're what the chair? A Bamsey, what is there? And you're talking about sheetrock and paint and showing the tractor that the former administration buy, and not really explain, which is legitimately so, the problem you can have with the tractors y'all get. You better sell them lemons, make a couple dollars and start buying some new ones, because they're that's very, very important. But Bamsey had captured the eyes of the world as Prime Minister Perry Christie had envisioned, and as leverage under Prime Minister Minnis. And why I could say that? Because of the amount of membership stake that they have, membership in the Caribbean Council of Higher Education, Caribbean Agricultural Resource Development Institute, Association of Caribbean Tertiary Institution, Global Forum of Agricultural Research, Global Board of Statistics, American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admission Officers. I mean, we're talking about the memorandum of understandings that has been developed under Bamsey. Well, they say again, nothing been happening in University College of the Bahamas, as we well know. I'm saddened that, from my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, that they did not take on Bamsey the way it was envisioned that they would have. If I'm wrong, you can correct it, but I know there was some delay or something to that, because it just makes me say, come on, man. Because I think Bamsey wanted to really get more knitted into that. And I trust whatever you say about it, because you're prominent in that regard. But it is listed here that there is a memorandum of understanding. So I'm not implying that nothing had been done. The University of Florida, University of Miami, University of West Indies, Augustine campus, Ocean University, the People's Republic of China, the University of Arkansas, Haka College, Bethune Cookman, Fuller Agricultural Mechanical Institution, the Aproponics Research Center, the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation and Agriculture, the Food and Agriculture Organization, United Nations, Gosson College, Central State University. My daughter Robin Ramming was the queen of Central State while she was there, graduated with honors, and she was Miss Central State. Boom! I approve that message. Thank you very much. 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 And I was proud when I went there. I went there when I was we were in power when I was the ambassador, and to visit my daughter, and I ensured that the Bahamian students come out, because as you will, all of you in your jobs, when you travel, you're not just a senator, you're not just a this, you represent, and you should reach out to our diaspora, give them a shot in the arm and everything else. That's why I don't get too nitpicky over certain things, even certain types of travel. We tend to send people to travel, then we rush them back. That's not an ambassador. You don't go there sending people and rush back. You have to interact with the country. You have to interact with your diaspora that is there. You need to see what their needs are. Sometimes you have to address their needs and their harms and their hurts. At Central State, I was impressed at the voluminous amount of Bahamian students that was there. It was the auditorium. I think I have it on video. I might have posted it on my Facebook page. We sang the national anthem. The president of Central State University was there. And it was proud to hear how the student, what do you call them? Alumni and current students, Bahamian students of Central State, had changed. Oh, you got to help me with the demographic of the school so much that the school numbers and performance ratings began to shoot up super high, and they were crying for more Bahamian students to come there. I'm serious. So even though we are not always happy with what we hear to be the D average, which some people don't really understand how the scale goes, regardless, when our children go away and they perform, those who don't get in trouble, we speak about it in sports, we perform at a high level. And it's true they say a prophet without honor in his own home. Aaron Bailey children, Sack children, everybody children performing and blowing these schools away in the United States with their level of performance. So kudos to our teachers. because they're doing something right. Because those who applied themselves, see, you can't blame me for the parent who don't want to help their own child, You can't blame me for the child who don't want to apply themselves. Because I can see the evidence of the children who do and what they did. And so in Central State, we began to see that. What I'm simply saying is, there was a dream by the former administration to do something that had never been done. Obviously, there was a tremendous amount of mistakes that happened. We saw the cost overruns. Fine, that happened. The dream was still solid. It was still kept up, and it was done with this administration. We had calamity that impacted some of the things. But even then, the heartbeat of BAMSI was still strong. That we see the relationships and the people who want to have relationships. But you know what? The biggest problem was BAMSI wasn't a person yet. BAMSI was a freak of nature. It was a Siamese twin that was stuck to the government. Because what this bill would do is make BAMSI a creature or human being. Because incorporation is how you separate yourself and your company becomes the human structure. And make BAMSI a who. So right now, this is really the official birth of BAMSI. And now they can come about on paper. No, follow what I'm saying. Because now that when this is done, we have people of academia and skills such as the incoming president who could do what she do. How rub noses with those on that level that she can do. And I guarantee she can do exceedingly abundantly above and beyond these, probably 13 or so schools that already have affiliation. Because now when she goes there, she represents an entity, a statutory entity called BAMSI. And it makes it easier for those persons who don't want to just donate and go get lost in a consolidated fund. And you got to hope somebody sends it to BAMSI. Can now do business with BAMSI on a whole different level. And this is why I'm saying, you have a set of tools before you right now that wherever I can push you, I'm going to be praying for you. And I ain't pushing to push you down either. Because we do need this today. So I want to make it clear that from the time BAMSI was envisioned in the heart, and even though it might have stumbled along, it is still here and is strong. And I believe that the world will one day mark the manner of BAMSI bearing if we keep straightening up and flying right. So with that, Mr. Vice, I end by saying I support this bill wholeheartedly and look forward to not only voting on this bill, but wherever I may be able to contribute personally or otherwise to the advancement of this program in the future. Thank you.
As many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Dr. Recia Hepburn.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice President. Oh, I forget. I would like to thank you for affording me the opportunity to address this esteemed body, and I rise in support of this bill. And I thank the Lord for allowing us to see a new day and allowing us to all be in good health. I note that my address comes after everyone has had the opportunity to participate in a delicious meal. The question, though, everyone should be asking is, where did the food come from that we just consumed? This is a very important question as it speaks to the heart of the issue, which is why the Bahamas Agricultural Marine Science Institute was created. Before I delve further into this debate, Mr. Vice President, I would be remiss if I did not congratulate Mr. Alexander Roca, a part of the hardworking team of the Senate, who recently welcomed a new addition to his family, Alexio. I would also like to welcome our newest senator, Mrs. Barnett Ellis, to this honorable chamber and have a small token from a local farmer for her. And to you, Mr. Vice President, your gift is before you, and we thank you for allowing us to speak about the organization such as BAMSI. I would like to thank, I would like to thank all of my colleagues in this House for the kind words and for their prayers and well wishes. Here you go. Celery. Mhm. Mhm. Mr. Vice President, there's no doubt in my mind that the vast majority of Bahamians today are very concerned about the rising level of food prices. Unfortunately, we are not alone in this regard, as globally, the cost of agricultural goods are on the rise. Our food import bill has reached approximately $1 billion, and these price increases, along with other external shocks, are key indicators of why there needs to be an organization such as BAMSI. Mr. Vice President, I come today not as a novice in this area, rather a trained person with passion and in constant pursuit of making agricultural development an integral component in the Bahamas. Mr. Vice President, when I was a mere 12-year-old, the then Minister of Agriculture, the Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie, spoke about the need for young persons to join this sector. He spoke about the need for expanding this industry and how its development would be integral to our country's success. In all honesty, before this speech, mainly because of the prodding of my mother, my focus was singularly on becoming a medical doctor. I thank God every day for the talk given by the Prime Minister Christie. His speech presented a clear vision, an understanding of the sector, and motivated me to pursue this course of study. I must thank my parents for their constant support, even though my mother preferred a medical doctor, particularly my father, though, who assisted me with learning and understanding traditional farming methods to support my goals on the island of Cat Island. We slaughtered lots of pigs together. Today, I am so proud and honored to be working with the Honorable Clay Sweeting, Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resources, who understands that we have to ensure that agriculture and marine development must be encouraged, promoted, and expanded to guarantee a better life for all Bahamians. Mr. Vice President, I was quite perturbed that anyone in that other place would speak and indicate that we don't know nor understand the purpose of BAMSI. As a person who attended the majority of meetings of inception of the formation of BAMSI, I know I can confidently speak on this. I can assure you that BAMSI's purpose was always to be a teaching, research, production, and extension vehicle to grow and develop agricultural needs of this country. These tenets haven't changed. In particular, one such key tenet of BAMSI is the focus on import substitution. I can tell you, Mr. Mens, who is now retired, worked tirelessly on the paper. I heard people in the other house talk about the top 70 crops. From 2008, we had the top 30 crops. We could tell you about import substitution in our country. This is not a novel process. As my colleague said, this is true. We have to make the paradigm shift in the people actually coming and learning more about agricultural and marine development. Once the proper support and infrastructure is in place, BAMSI will thrive as a science-based, sustainable, and technology-driven organ that will stabilize the supply chain and provide services that meets the need of the Bahamas. While the leader of the opposition and I actually have some things in common. We both went to CLB around the same time and Tuskegee with slightly different degrees, as my associates was in agribusiness and my bachelor's was in animal and poultry science with a minor in business. But here the similarity ends, as I did more than a few classes in agricultural economics. Rather, I completed my master's degree in this study at Clemson University and went on to complete my PhD in agricultural policy and international trade with a minor in statistics. So while we at BAMSI appreciate and note the concerns from the leader of opposition, we, the experts and lifelong practitioners in this field, will take it from here. Our minister has charged us to be relentless in our efforts to ensure that BAMSI facilitates and sustains food security for all Bahamians. And by God's grace, this will be done. We at BAMSI fully understand the need for a diagnostic laboratory, as was also noted by the leader of the opposition. In fact, a diagnostic laboratory is something that I have called for from 2008 when I returned home and would have been elated if this was established during his oversight of the institution. Again, I do agree with the leader of the opposition when he stated, and I quote, "Did they get it all of it right? Of course not," end quote. As a result, we have all heard of the myriad of issues left in place by our predecessors. But I am not here to discuss the past. It's a new day, and as my chairman stated, BAMSI is working in a new way. Mr. Vice President, we have identified some of the issues and we have hit the ground running and working on solutions because the Bahamian public is not interested in the problems we have, only what we will do to resolve them. Our agenda is large, and I could assure you, with the continued help of the Lord and the employees that sit in the gallery of this institution, we will act on our minister's mandate to not only make it better in the Bahamas, but make it best at BAMSI. Mr. Vice President, to understand the economics of agriculture, you cannot have it both ways, as implied by the leader of opposition. BAMSI can be the ultra-competitive institute and have large wastage. The two cannot coexist in the current production levels of the organization. Let's put it in perspective. Given the size of the import market, even if BAMSI was producing at full capacity, which it is not, we would not put a significant dent in the almost $1 billion food import bill, and therefore we cannot be considered competitive. Yesterday, I was in a meeting at the offices of the Prime Minister, and Senator Alcides was there as well, and heard what I already knew and thought everybody knew, that we cannot meet the current level of local production, cannot meet the current level of the demand that we have from our local, just the suppliers and wholesalers. We can't meet the local, we can't. Much less the export industry of the tourism sector that comes here. It should be noted that we at BAMSI are actively working on eliminating products wastage. And it's something that we've already started to focus on. It is unfortunate that some member of the other house did not see any of the newspaper articles on this topic before giving their presentation, as they would have seen that we are working to ensure that persons who are on the food assistance programs will have access now to healthy options of fruits and vegetables from BAMSI. I paid a courtesy call with the Minister of Social Services, and we have already started this program and launched it. Wastage is a thing of the past. We can't afford it, we don't need it, and we will not tolerate it. We are also actively working on value-added programs for surplus goods that cannot be given away in the voucher program. We don't want to give people damaged things that we would not eat. That only makes sense. But we know that things can be processed. And so you take that your tomato don't have to look beautiful, even though, I like things a little rough around the edges, but everybody doesn't. Because I prefer a sugar banana over them other kind. But to each his own. The people of the Bahamas have given our New Day government a mandate to make the elusive food security a reality. And this is what we're doing in solidifying BAMSI as a vehicle that will facilitate this. We can't do it all, but together we could try. While the government's policy indicate that some businesses should ensure that at least 40% of products are local, Mr. Vice President, I encourage each and every one of us, not just us sitting at the table, but those at the gallery, on the side, and those watching us at home, to make at least 25% of our plates locally grown and produced. If you are uncertain how you can go about doing this, please note we have several options. You can visit farmers markets or small local farmers. Mr. Claudius LaFleur will always give you seedlings. Ms. Sharon Colby is the one that donated the smoothie mix for our new senator. Mr. Rai Badu donated the cauliflower, other things. Our own Senator, Ruben Raming, just donated us some honey. We have persons like Sydney who's out there that are open and welcome to meet our needs. Schools like H.O. Nash, GHS, CV Bethel all have great flourishing agricultural programs. Then we also have BAMSI's and BAIC Distribution Center. There's an opportunity for all of us to make this commitment to agricultural development in our country. We at BAMSI are dedicated to this task, and I am here to encourage not only my colleagues, but all of the citizens of the Bahamas to make this pledge. Through BAMSI, its affiliated farmers program, and some of our short courses, which I am passing around, we can learn more about agriculture and marine resources and take courses that can improve our everyday life, like our virtual food preservation and safety class, what I'm passing around, which is free. So again, stopping wastage even in your homes. You know, my parents' fridge went bad, and we just took out all the produce and that. I made jams. I love making jams. That's like one of my part-time pastimes. You can make bottled tomatoes. There's so many things that we actually have the ability to do. And, you know, I wish my grandmother was still alive. She just passed last year. So many things that she taught me, even though I was the best taster. I'm not almost as good a maker as she was. But there are just so many things like, learning how to make jams. And I didn't even know about pectin until I got to college. Because what we used to do is just scrape the lime skin in our jam. And it's the same component. Because you only want to thicken your jam. But it's amazing, eh? Old school with new school knowledge. Even when I worked at the piggery, I said, I came here with a bachelor's degree and William teaching me things that they never taught me in books. You know, but you have to get a hands-on experience, and that's what BAMSI is all about. We want to make those linkages from theory and practical. But let me stick, I don't want to get off target. Mr. Vice President, sorry, I'm used to saying Mano. BAMSI also plays a role in our country's health and wellness. As the immediate past president of the Bahamas Heart Association, and I'd like to thank my fellow Senate colleagues who purchased pins. We appreciate the contribution. I would like to remind members that it is Heart Month, and heart disease is a #1 death, not only in our country, but in the Western world. BAMSI's partnership with local farmers, BAIC, BASFA, and others allows us to be well on our way to ensuring that every Bahamian has access and the ability to eat local, to eat healthy, safe foods. While several persons have discussed the benefits of fruits and vegetables, I want us to pay particular attention to how agriculture and marine development can assist with mental health and rehabilitation. While the president of Bahamas Agricultural Forum for Youth, there was a program started at the Lignum Vitae unit at Sandlands. This was done because there was a direct correlation with gardening to improve mental health and rehabilitation, and by providing skill sets to a population that might not have one. This skill set could also be utilized to improve quality daily life for patients. I am happy to inform this body that one of the persons who was in that unit pulled me aside on my most recent trip to BAMSI Andros and informed me that he came to work to BAMSI partly based on that program. This is what fuels me to continue my passion in the field of agriculture. Most recently, I learned that BAMSI also had a similar program at the Department of Corrections. This is something that I will be following up with, and I've already started tentative talks with Principal Corrections Officer Fraser. Mr. Vice President, I am thankful to say that I made a courtesy call on the Minister of Education to encourage the introduction of a BJC and BGCSE exam in agriculture, which we all know is the science. The minister has pledged her support for this venture. We understand that we have lots of students slipping through the cracks, and we must reconsider the academic policy for entrance into this institution. We always recognize that there's a rainbow after the rain. And now after Dorian, COVID-19, the straw market fire, September 11th, we can leverage these external shocks to shift the public's attention back to the reality that we must have some level of food security. Mr. Vice President, some of the products that we have set up here are for schools like H.O. Nash, Mr. Raya Badu, Mr. Claude LaFleur, and I am humbled to say that at H.O. Nash, I taught one of the agriculture teachers that are now teaching another generation. Mr. Vice President and fellow senators, we fully accept that we have more to do. When speaking with one of the students in the field, Adrian, I promised I wouldn't say his last name, to purchase my lettuce and other vegetables. We discussed the benefits of agriculture and why he chose this field. I was so happy to see so many young persons that we can hopefully enroll in BAMSI. However, Mr. Vice President, when I asked Mr. Adrian if I could share our discussion when I spoke in the Senate, he innocently asked me, "Oh, I didn't know y'all just do anything in there." I informed his teacher that I would like to invite them after exams to come and visit the Senate and see that we actually do the people's work. With just over 75 students in our associates program, not including persons in our certificate programs, BAMSI has something to offer for all of our citizens. Mr. Vice President, I can assure you that the interest is here. Just this morning, while attending the National Gender-Based Violence Law Review Forum, which is why I was absent in the morning, a young man, Mr. Colley, stopped to ask questions and collect brochures from me to find out how we could enroll in some of our classes. At BAMSI, our agri-education can transform anyone into an agripreneur, and we encourage persons to find out more about us. I would be remiss, Mr. Vice President, if I did not thank all of the members of Parliament that have made donations of greenhouses to schools and parks in their area. These donations promote interest among young persons and introduces them into exciting fields. We understand that some of our courses might be cost prohibitive, and we have lined up with partners who are willing to give scholarships to persons who may be interested. So do not let the cost be the impeding factor. If there's an interest, let us know. Mr. Vice President, the United States is the third largest agricultural producer in the world, after China and India, and ranks as the world's largest exporter. And we know that this is one of the major places that we import from. These countries all heavily subsidize their agriculture sector and agricultural education. And as someone who has worked on the Farm Bill for the South Carolina Department of Agriculture, I can assure you our subsidies are a drop in the bucket in comparison. To be competitive or even remotely make a dent in the food bill, we need to ensure that we engage in research and innovation as well. There are many new agriculture and marine developments happening daily, from mango leather, edible dishware, nanotechnology. We have the ability to capitalize by partnerships and encouraging persons to attend BAMSI and learn some of these new techniques. We must conduct an agricultural census and ensure that we know where we currently are so we can have a baseline to move forward. Unfortunately, I know the last one was in 1994. We understand that urbanization inevitably isolates people from the land and draws them away from the natural process of food production. But we must have a paradigm shift in not only generating more producers, but also purchasers, ensuring that we buy local and eat what is produced locally, and to be willing to work together. It is time for us to be the best at BAMSI, for BAMSI to be the vehicle of the paradigm shift to eating locally grown food, for BAMSI to lower our carbon footprint, for BAMSI to continue to facilitate creating backyard farmers, for BAMSI to create agripreneurs, because BAMSI is all of us Bahamians. I would like to thank you, Mr. Vice President, for my time, and God bless us all, and God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michaela Ellis.
Mr. President, I'm grateful for the opportunity on National Cabbage Day to contribute to the debate of the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute Bill 2022, better known as BAMSI. Mr. President, I would first like to express condolences to the family of the late Godfrey Kelly, especially his daughter Catherine, who is one of my partners at the firm of Graham Thompson. Mr. Kelly was the most senior member of the bar at the time of his passing. My colleague Dana Wells expressed it best when he said that the loss of Mr. Kelly leaves a void in real estate and general transactional matters. His depth of knowledge and willingness to share was a remarkable. God blessed him, and his legacy will long survive. Mr. Kelly was also the nation's first Minister of Education, and his affinity for education continued after he left politics. He served as the registrar for examinations for the Bar Association and lectured article students. It is unfortunate he will not lie in state so that we may all pay our final respects to him. May his soul and all the souls of the faithfully departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. Mr. Vice President, my apologies. Mr. Vice President, I'm proud to support this bill. Despite its fiery start, BAMSI remains rich with potential for development.
Yes.
This legislation is imperative to the continued development of the Institute and Agriculture and Marine Science in the Bahamas. I must commend the previous board of the Institute, particularly the late Tennyson Wells, a former Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries himself, who was also chairman of the board at the time of his death, for their commitment to public service and for ensuring that BAMSI is poised to embark on its next chapter. This legislation is part of his legacy. This legislation is also significant, Mr. Vice President, because it mirrors the legislation of the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute Act 2010, which was passed by another great Free National Movement administration. Mr. Vice President, F&M governments, with the assistance of the Law Reform and Revision Commission, make legislation that stands the test of time, legislation worthy of being emulated. Mr. Vice President, BAMSI is a research and educational facility. And maybe it's the sociologist in me. I have a bachelor's of arts in sociology. But I see this as a prime opportunity for the Bahamas to be at the forefront of educational research in the Caribbean, and particularly the role of women in agriculture. Women are essential to the development of sustainable food security in the Bahamas and in the Caribbean. The participation of women is not only crucial to addressing food security, but also ensuring nutrition in households. Globally, half of all farmers in the developing world are women. Agriculture can be seen as central to the economic growth of women in developing countries, and closing the gender gap in agriculture is important to increasing food availability and food security. Sadly, there is little research regarding women in agriculture. The research that exists is largely focused on developing nations in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Caribbean research in this area, although it has developed over the last 40 years, but there is still little research on the role of women. Many assume that women are simply small-scale farmers that grow food for their household consumption. The lack of research has made women in agriculture invisible. Their achievements, their innovations, their impact has been silenced. Likewise, so are their voices. Awiki Emezi, said, "Understand this if you understand nothing. It is powerful to be seen." In countries all over the world, they are celebrating Black History Month, particularly in countries where Black people are a minority. In that dialogue, Minorities often talk about the importance of being seen and what it felt like the first time they went into the store and saw a doll that looked like them or a Disney princess with the same color as them. To see yourself reflected in part of the population. The lack of research about women in farming, and even women in farming in the Caribbean, gives the appearance that there are not many women farmers in the Caribbean. And that is simply not true. Women are bona fide commercial farmers. Their roles go beyond simply taking their husband's produce to the market for sale. We have farmers like Karen Shepherd at Down to Earth Adventure Farms, Lady Di, whose pineapple fields are featured on the Bahamas Tourism website, and Sharon Colby, who sent me my smoothie mix. We have many stories about our mothers and grandmothers that grew a myriad of crops in the backyard or the property beside the house. Those stories must be told. It is through telling their stories and recording their existence and their experiences that we can develop and improve. We learn what their needs are so that they can produce more. We learn where, if any, the gender gaps are. Farming is not easy. It is a science. Senator Raming said he was correct when he said farming was therapeutic. I know I, for certain, in the lockdown, threw some seeds in the dirt and hoped that my harvest would grow. As a science, it must be documented and studied so that we can learn the trends over time. The voice of women must be a part of this process. We are fortunate that BAMSI has a history of strong female leadership. I encourage Senator Hepburn to develop a routine of research and qualitative analysis at BAMSI so that 10 years from now, a neophyte senator, when researching her contribution to a debate on agriculture, can refer to a paper on women and sustainable agriculture in the Bahamas. Mr. Vice President, through you, I encourage all Bahamians, particularly those of us responsible for the acquisition of groceries, to visit the BAMSI Distribution Center on East Bay Street to secure fresh fruits and vegetables at a reasonable price. We have all seen the increase of cost of food, and it's not just at the food store. While we pray that government is able to implement measures and policies to help us remove VAT on breadbasket items, we must do our part to mitigate rising costs. We must buy Bahamian. There's no reason that the pina coladas on Arawak Key can't be made with sweet Eleuthera pineapples. I dream a dream of conch salad and grilled conch and conch fritters only made with local tomatoes, onions, and peppers.
Yes, I like that dream.
The Institute and its distribution center provide tremendous opportunities for Bahamians to develop their agricultural skills and a vehicle for farmers to sell their produce. Bahamians are innovative. The more opportunities for innovation, the better the Bahamas will be. Mr. Vice President, it's been a little over a week, but I have discovered the distinct pleasure that comes from contributing in this upper chamber. May God continue to bless you. May He bless the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Sciences Institute, and as always, may He continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable James Turner.
Cabbage Day. This is a beautiful, look at this, huh? I mean, as organic as it can be. Mr. Vice President, just before I really get started, there's something that I'd like to declare because, this morning I went to the gender issue, I went to that conference and, I listened to what was being expressed. And I really appreciate everything that's being said all around this country about all types of things associated with women and all types of behavior. But I want to declare in this honorable chamber today that if Dr. Hepburn were not a woman, she would still be the perfect person for that job. Race. He says she loves being a woman, though. Let me tell you, race, sex has nothing to do with intellect, intelligence, and the ability to deliver. And she is a good example of what can happen every time we give our people an opportunity. The Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute Bill 2022. This is a peculiar thing because, I must admit that I was familiar with BAMSI, and I've had folks that attended BAMSI, and I shared a story in here of my godchild who thought to go to Andros, to go to some farm, to go to what? It was punishment. He thought it was punishment. But I tell you, he came back later, and when he came back, he said, Godfather, I want to talk to you about something. And and then a young person tell him talk to you about something, yeah, that usually means something wrong. So I figured I was going to have to debate with his parents and try to get him back in Grand Bahama. But to my surprise, he came and he asked if I would be willing to support him when he was done there. I thought it was something unusual, but she shared with me this morning that those are some of the objectives of that very same institute. So certainly they're doing some things right. It is clear that this is an important bill. This is a bill that speaks about preparation for the future. It deals with what is going on now in the current, and it will be relevant to those who will come behind us. In every nation, there comes a time when we need to exhibit a sense of maturing adolescence or outright adulthood, and we see as we begin to discuss what is happening in agriculture in our country that we are prepared to behave as adults. All around the world, people are concerned with food and matters associated with agriculture, so it is only appropriate that at this time, the Bahamas takes a gut check and make sure that we get this one right. Now, before I go really into this bill and get into several areas of it, I would be remiss if I didn't take a few moments just to express a sense of appreciation for our forefathers that had the wealth of knowledge and the wherewithal to present this idea. Because I could remember when Prime Minister Christie presented this idea was met with some eyebrows raising and there was some strange behavior. Because how dare we go about talking about creating an institute that could specialize in this type of thing? And here we are today speaking about a bill that will simply advance it. It will almost cause for BAMSI to behave as if it's on steroids, because now it has the infrastructural support to move it along. I can recall so many of those unusual comments, but I must tell you, Mr. Vice President, it wasn't so long ago that agriculture was not popular, it wasn't sexy, it wasn't white collar, and it certainly was not associated with rags to riches stories. That just wasn't agriculture. However, today, thanks to the past pioneers that advanced this whole BAMSI idea, BAMSI is about to make agriculture and technology a marriage made in heaven, and a relationship whose prosperity for all concerned will become very evident. I find youngsters today excited about agriculture. When I was in school, agriculture? No, man. But today, when you merge technology with what agriculture can deliver, it is a fascinating thing. While this bill deals with virtually all aspects of such projects, given the time that I have allotted, I am going to really focus on the functions of the Institute, because surely if they execute the functions as set forth for the Bahamas, for BAMSI, the story shall become one of perpetual success. Bahamians always have great ideas, but it is usually the execution that's the difference between success and failure. BAMSI is required to play a leadership and coordinating role in advancing academic, technical, agricultural interests, marine interests, forestry, related training, and a host of other elements. But it is also expected to be responsive to the needs and the interests of our country. This is a mouthful, I know, but it covers such a large scope. But I must declare that, simply put, BAMSI shall emerge as our conscience on agriculture and the marine sciences. I hear a lot about backyard farming, but in reality, from what I've seen so far on backyard farming, most of it is really the distribution of some seeds, a garden shovel, and a pickaxe. It got to be a lot more than that. There's a lot more to that, to backyard farming than that. There is a better way to advance a cohesive mechanism of residential farming, and that intelligence lies in BAMSI. A lot of people desire to do it, but they just don't know how to do it. I heard this morning that BAMSI presents free classes for those persons who are interested in that. That is going to go a long way in propelling backyard farming throughout our country. This is their mandate, and it is good to know that we shall have a group of competent professionals aiding Bahamians with advancing such an urgent cause. Where we are today should not be where we are 5 years from now. We should be smarter, we should be a lot more productive, we should have a unique relationship with BAMSI that everyone in here should be able to celebrate. Mr. Vice President, I know that there should be a public and private sector partnership, and I read this in their document. There should be a public and private sector partnership with employers, trade or commercial confederations, and other stakeholders to develop courses of instruction and instructional methodologies necessary to attain synergies and cohesion between instruction and the training at the Institute and the needs of the national economy, and this has been assigned to BAMSI. There is a lot of noise in the market, and most entities recognize that we need to do something. One of the first things we need to do is to recognize whose responsibility it is to bring these relationships together. BAMSI is like, I heard references to church in here. BAMSI is like a good pastor, a good preacher. A good preacher can bring good couples together who are members of his church. BAMSI should be able to recognize those in various industries, commercial industries, those who have certain needs that BAMSI can bridge, that gap that they can bridge. This bill identifies that BAMSI shall consciously bring stakeholders together for the advancement of a mutual benefit. This is good because we talk about synergy and cohesion as if the mention of these buzzwords will do the job. But this is serious business. And we must act in a serious fashion, and that is exactly what I see taking place here. There are hotels, resorts, restaurants, marine tour operators, and facilities, all of whom can benefit in a tremendous way from a focused marine and science facility. The Bahamas has a great number of opportunities before our country, but I must tell you that in order to extract the best practices, it would be advantageous to have international alliances that bring certain experiences to the table. There is no need, or very little need, to start from ground zero and attempt to reinvent the wheel. Truth be told, BAMSI is expected to enter into associations and affiliations that bring these levels of expertise to us, that allows us to move even faster in this country. Grand Bahama, and especially the eastern end of the island, is no newcomer to farming. We heard references earlier to citrus farming in Abaco. We always knew Andres had tremendous potential. But I will tell you that I met with a group called the Rural Bahamian Women and Family Cooperative. This is a group of approximately 100 women and their family who are the type of groups that can very easily be supported by a BAMSI effort. They spoke about farming in East Grand Bahama before Hurricane Dorian and the fact that they were doing very good producing things. But as with COVID and the hurricanes, we suffered some damage there. But when we spoke about what was happening with BAMSI, I saw the way their eyes lit up. I saw the interest because they really felt that there was an alliance coming. I believe that what we see emerging from this bill and the BAMSI relationship is going to be very important to the growth of so many islands, and Grand Bahama is no exception. In any legitimate agricultural undertaking, equipment and the know-how is required. When I spoke with these principals, they spoke about the damage and the things that are required on the farm, and they spoke about greenhouses. Now, I must confess that when they spoke of greenhouses, what I knew of greenhouses is little that I read around. But when they spoke about year-round production, it was confirmed in here that with certain greenhouse types, you can have year-round production of certain food products. All of these things are easily achievable if we focus on it. This is why BAMSI is so important, because you have to have a group that is focused on it. There are going to be people like us. We will say the right words most of the times, eh? We'll talk about what should have been done, what wasn't done, and who didn't do it. But our people are concerned with what's about to happen. So what we're saying to them is this act allows BAMSI the independence to do what is expected. This is a good act. This is something that all Bahamians should celebrate. There's nothing complicated about this one. We expect that moving forward as we seek to exploit the opportunities ahead, that BAMSI will be a guiding point that allows us to reap the harvest of today while preserving what is necessary for a sustainable maritime industry of tomorrow. We look at the effects of climate change, coupled with some additional local irresponsible marine harvesting behavior, and we know that there still remains the need for a proper institution that provides good information on the best and legal practices. Bahamians have all types of ideas, and we guess about a lot of things. But some of the things that we guess about when it comes to marine resources is very dangerous, because you can destroy a coral head very easily, but it is not very easily replaced. That is true. Somebody has to be the conscience to continue to remind our people that as you go out and you do these things, there are some things that are acceptable, some things that are not, and there are some things that are going to cost you what money can't pay. The emerging experts in this area must be associated with or must be BAMSI. To be able to educate, to guide, to promote, and deliver on education, and this change is good. It's a good thing. This bill seeks to confirm BAMSI's ability to confer degrees, grant diplomas and certificates and other awards and honors, all that are usually associated with this type of institution. But Mr. Vice President, we ought to give this institution every opportunity to rival the best that exists in their comparable set. No more just accepting. We have to set the bar high, really high. So even if they fall short, we'll still come here and celebrate. There are some institutions today that when I think about them, if you say that you were a graduate of that institution, people look upon you with, certain elements of reverence. They give you, the look gives you a sense of accomplishment. There ought to be a day that when people say they came from BAMSI, when they say that they are graduates of BAMSI, we look at them a certain way. We look at them with a certain reverence because we know that they originated from a team of focused individuals that are delivering in this country. I suspect that as we move forward, that will become a reality. And to say that you would have graduated from BAMSI will become a very prestigious thing. I'll tell you something about Bahamians. When Bahamians perceive that there is quality in something, they will go to no ends to pay for that. You hear what I'm saying? Mr. Vice President, when Bahamians perceive that there is value in something, they will go to very far ends to pay for it. A lot of parents today believe that an education offshore is really the best thing. The education offshore is very expensive, Going to COB is very affordable, but many of them believe that it is better to be trained some unusual places. I'm only saying this to you in the context that I know the training that people can get at BAMSI is affordable, it's good stuff, and it's about to get better. We can have all the desire in the world to eat well, as far as we can imagine. But if you cannot get good fruits and vegetables, if you can't get good beef, you're only imagining, you're only dreaming. Because if you can only get canned carrots, canned carrots is what you're going to eat. If you can only afford to buy canned beef is what most of our people are going to eat. That's why this whole thing about agriculture and dealing with marine resources is so important. Perhaps this is our next best opportunity for affordability and good quality to be synchronized relative to our food chain. So often quality takes a backseat to affordability nowadays. You go in the food stores, you see all the good stuff, but you see the price and you start to think, boy, what do we do? In many instances, we hardly know what we're even consuming via these imports. Andros, Abaco, Grand Bahama, and some of our southern islands have the ability, have the potential, have the fertile soil, and now we're going to marry that with the know-how to deliver an excellent agricultural product. We ought to know what we are feeding our people. You know something? Every time I look at my grandchildren, I realize that we have a dietary problem in this country. Because if it doesn't have sugar, they have issues with it. But we have an opportunity in this generation to fix that. Because when you can produce this type of vegetable that look like this, it just looks pretty. It causes you to just want to consume it. Look at the products on that table over there associated with Bamsi. If I were in a food store, I'd probably walk straight past that simply because I would assume I don't want to pay for that. But Bamsi is going to cause for a paradigm shift in this country. Because when you see an abundance of that available, and I believe, Mr. Vice President, they tell me in Nassau you have the fortune of buying $20 boxes. That's the same box I believe we got in Grand Bahama for $45.50. Thank you. Yeah, Doc, you got to help us out. But what I'm saying to you today is that I support where we're headed with Bamsi. Every now and then, the country does some things that are really good. It causes everybody to celebrate. And as a colleague said here earlier, it has nothing to do with politics. This is just a good thing to do. This is something that the Bahamian people expect us to do. So it's a good thing for us to be tied to this today. History is going to remember us many ways. I started by speaking about Dr. Hepburn saying that it doesn't matter if she was a male or female, she's a competent professional. They will remember her performance at Bamsi, They will remember us here today. History will record many of us as being kind, some of us as being generous, some of us as being concerned. But today, this Senate should be remembered for having done a good thing, because we stand here to support this Bamsi bill. Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President.
As many the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much. I rise to support the bill before the Senate, Mr. Vice President, namely the Bahamas Agricultural and Marine Science Institute Bill 2022, which seeks to provide for the establishment, incorporation, governance, control, and administration by a board of the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute, and for matters incidental thereto. I'd like to add my personal congratulations, Mr. Vice President, to our fellow senators who will play a pivotal role in the advancement of Bamsi. That is Senator the Honorable Tyrell Young, Bamsi's Executive Vice Chairman, and Senator the Honorable Dr. Eresia Hepburn, Bamsi's President. And as Senator James Turner Rule would have said, it doesn't matter if she's a male or female. She's a competent professional, and competent professional she is indeed, quite qualified. And I'm very proud of her as a fellow senator, as a fellow woman, as a fellow Bahamian, for her accomplishments in education and just her experience and exposure. And I know that they will lend well to this particular assignment. And yes, it doesn't matter if she's male or female, but I'm glad she's a girl boss. You know what I mean? It's nothing like a smart, beautiful Black woman who stems from Cat Island, I might say, who I know will do wonders at Bouncy. And I have to say, I have to say, Senator James, that even though this very good woman senator, president of Bouncy, didn't give me any gifts, you know, I still love her. And since it's National Cabbage Day, and you have this big, beautifully grown cabbage in front of you, I just want to let you know that I'm open to receiving cabbage. I am, exactly. And Senator Russell said you can't take it back to Freeport anyway. So if you want, I can take that home right for you, and I can do all sorts of stuff with that. Yes, I got hooked my Senator pick stock up. So, Mr. Vice President, successive governments have played a role in the development of Bouncy. And it's my understanding from the other place that Bouncy is PLP's baby. And now it's my understanding from here that Bouncy wasn't even quite born. So I'm not sure what stage Bouncy was in. But what I do know is that the average parent, and in this case being the PLP government, will naturally find a complaint with anyone who babysits their baby, right? Nobody does it like them. And, you know, even though the person gave the best care they could possibly give to the child, when the parent comes to pick it up, the child up is still like, oh, you know, da-da-da. Because as far as they're concerned, nobody cares for the baby like they would have. And so what I will say, though, Mr. Vice President, to dispel some of the myths that continue to perpetrate, that we did care for the baby in the last administration, and we made strides with Bouncy. In fact, the last administration helped to substantially frame the bill that we are here debating today. And so while I don't have, Mr. Vice President, any full color, full size photographs to hold up to the camera and show, I will say that we made some strides. For example, when we took office in 2017, Bouncy did not have a board at the time. And so we would have been the ones to institute that board. And the employees didn't have job descriptions, and we gave them purpose for coming to work. And it's very important. If you don't know why you're there and you don't have a job description, then, you know, it's difficult to do anything purposeful. Needless to say, and I have to say, Mr. Vice President, I felt a partisan obligation after a previous colleague spoke to really kind of settle the record in some regards. So we didn't meet any proper site plan or anything in place when we got there. But the point of the matter is we worked hard to make things happen at Bouncy because really and truly, food security is a nonpartisan issue. It's a nonpartisan issue. And so in the last administration, Mr. Vice President, we would have worked with the IDB, the FAO, which is the agricultural arm of the UN, CARDI, that's the agricultural arm of CARICOM, and IECA, which is the agricultural arm of OAS, Organization of American States, in order to come up with a range of studies in agriculture in order to make evidence-based decisions. And those partnerships and research would have helped us to identify challenges as well as opportunities and strategies, Mr. Vice President, that would have been required to make substantial dent in our food bill. Because the reality is that $1 billion is a lot to spend on importing food items. I think $650 million of it, if I'm not mistaken, goes toward fruits and vegetables, livestock, and flowers, while $400 million is spent on processed food. And we cannot produce the thousands of items we import. It's not practical or realistic. But we managed in the last administration, and I heard reference as well to a previous administration, to determine what we could competitively produce here. And so some 77 items were isolated agricultural products, which I think included fruits and vegetables, small ornamental plants, and livestock. And so a part of that whole study period as well was to determine how we could attract foreign investment and empower Bahamians who are willing to work in the sector. And so we left a framework in place that would help to guide crop forecasting in the Bahamas. We looked at the potential, Mr. Vice President, of the impact of hurricanes on the agricultural sector based on, you know, which tax regime we use or which subsidy to support farmers to be able to really predict what the loss would be and how to mitigate and manage it. And we would have negotiated greenhouses and really looked at temperature control so that we could expand the growing seasons, which I think some of my colleagues would have talked about here today. So, Mr. Vice President, we did do some of the heavy lifting, and I cannot allow the illusion to persist that we didn't, that we didn't. And so I have to say that our current party leader and leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition, in his capacity then as Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resources, he consulted with and engaged opposition on a number of occasions to get input on various matters. And another thing we did do during the pandemic, in particular in Dorian, through the Emergency Food Assistance Program, was to give $5 million in grants to assist farmers and fishers and fishermen and with whatever it is they need to get, whether that was layer birds or backyard kits, fertilizer, seeds. We gave assistance, Mr. Vice President. And what's important too is to really be able to solve the challenge of access to market, an ongoing challenge that many farmers would have had. And so the last administration would have passed the policy that persons looking to invest in the Bahamas must purchase 40% of the food that they intend to utilize for their operations from local farmers and fishermen. And so as we move forward and we continue to strengthen the industry, at least now there's a market waiting for them. And so the reality is that we did make steps. We did take strides. And it's all relative, I guess. I would say that the lifting was heavy. It depends on how strong you are, because Doc may or may not agree. But I would say that we did some heavy lifting. And so the reality is that I've heard the leader of the opposition talk about really building the farmers' capacity to go directly to the market, because when you depend on the government as a distributor, there are some challenges in that in terms of the way the wheels of government move. And I can say that even as a former public servant, it's just the reality of how the bureaucracy is set up. And so I cannot understate the importance of continuity in government. And even though our good, intelligent, smart, talented, beautiful Senator President said she got it, which is what she basically said, I really do trust that the New Day administration will likewise include the opposition in decisions related to food security, because when it comes to the economics of agriculture, like you said, you far outpay some, but I'm sure some still may have something to contribute that can help us. Because the reality is that education, when it comes to agriculture, which is what this bill seeks to really help advance the cause of, is very important. Because my grandfather, for example, was a farmer who farmed and farmed and farmed and sold produce to persons he exported from Exuma to New Providence for years and years and years and years. I mean, massive amounts of everything, mangoes, bananas. I remember going in Andrew to take photographs of the farm when he had lost things because of hurricane. He was so disturbed, and he really did, pretty much medium, large scale farming, but who has really taken that up from him? A lot of times when our previous generations die out, they die and they take so much with them, so much knowledge, so much information, whether that's in farming, whether that's in culinary arts, and in so many other fields. And so what BAMSI will allow is for current generations to learn and continue to teach how to farm, how to be independent, how to feed ourselves, how to sustain ourselves. Because I'll tell you, I, like so many others who have mentioned it here today, I too have planted things with hopes that it would grow. But I have to say that my thumbs are not green at all. And so it never seems to work out for me, even indoor plants, Doc. Even indoor plants. It's just, it doesn't work out for me. And so I continue to try, but I seem to fail in trying. So hopefully I could access some of these certificate courses that BAMSI is offering, and maybe have like some sort of, or maybe I need to sit in Senator Raming's in his yard and learn some stuff. But we really have to teach our people when it comes to agriculture and marine. We have to educate our people. And like the good senator said, come to a point where when people say they went to BAMSI, it's a matter of distinction. People are proud to say that. Because the reality is F&M, PLP, Pinling, Ingram, Christie, Ingram again, Christie again, Minnis, Davis, it really doesn't matter. When people are hungry, I think the last thing on their mind is how they voted. And so when it comes to food security, it's a nonpartisan issue, okay? It's a nonpartisan issue. So we have to work together And we have to ensure that when it comes to being able to eat, our people can eat. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter which government did what, who does what. We have to work together on this. And this is why I would say that the opposition in both places has been in such strong support of this particular bill. And so anything to do with the improvement of the agricultural sector and increased agricultural production, I'm all in support of, Mr. Vice President. Well, I thank you all so much for bringing balance to all of the, grimaces and nonverbal cues that I'm getting from my good senator at the end there, throughout the presentation. So I appreciate that. And so we have to become exporters. We have to become exporters rather than importers, Mr. Vice President. And just as food security is important, food insecurity is likewise important in our nation. And so we have to look out for the vulnerable. We have to do what we can to really mitigate the challenges of hunger in our community. And so we need to ensure that Bahamians who need it have access to food. And we can do this through increasing the Social Services Food Assistance Program and perhaps reinstating the National Food Program and Unemployment Assistance Program. And even, I would say, reverse the decision on VAT to breadbasket items and perhaps look at the list of breadbasket items and expand them to include more healthy options, because food security is serious business. And I have to take a moment to compliment those agencies and individuals who are out there continuing to do their part to assist with hunger in our community. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak at St. Anne's High School, St. Anne's School actually, to their Red Nose Day Assembly. And I have to compliment Kaden Smith, who's now a 17-year-old 12th grader and the head girl at St. Anne's, who started the Red Nose Day local chapter here when she was 10 years old, a primary school student at St. Anne's back then. And just because she drove past some gentleman who was eating out of a garbage, and it really bothered her to a point that she decided to make a difference. And we can all make a difference, Mr. Vice President. There's so many ills in our society that need to be addressed that we can help with, that we don't just drive by. We decide to make a difference. And so she continues to raise awareness and raise funds to try to help mitigate hunger in our community. And so I want to compliment her as a young person doing that, and St. Anne's as a school for giving her the support over the years in doing this quite noble mission. But when we get to a point, whether it's Red Nose Day, whether it's the Bahamas Feeding Network, whether it's Hands for Hunger, or how many other organizations, the Red Cross, and the list goes on, Great Commission, which we would have visited last week or this week. The reality is that hunger exists, and we have land in our country that can be farmed. We have oceans around us that can be fished. And so we have to be able to access food, and we have to be able to figure out the logistics and distribution so that the persons among us, the haves and the have-nots, will all be able to eat in the Bahamas, because no one in the Bahamas should go to bed hungry. That's just not ideal at all. And so I support this bill, Mr. Vice President, that will allow BAMSI to access funds, access grants, be able to get money in order to really expand, whether that's local funds or international funds, to be able to grow their campus and, get some tractors. I'm not getting into the tractor controversy, but the reality is that things cost money, Mr. Vice President. And what this bill does is allows BAMSI to operate autonomously so that they could actually direct their own future, much like the University of the Bahamas and BTVI, the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute, does. And so one day we will have the honor of interacting with graduates who are from the prestigious BAMSI, who would have graduated and gotten degrees and certifications. And like I said, I am going to really look at accessing some of these certificate programs myself. And I'd like to recommend to the president, if it's not already being done, when the next one is held, the food preservation and food safety workshop, perhaps we could look at some times off hours so that persons who work full time and even students because I have a high schooler who is a very talented chef who literally, when she makes homemade spaghetti, rolls flour on the counter and cuts the spaghetti noodles and makes the spaghetti. She makes Asian food. She makes pastries and everything from scratch. Whatever it is she's making, the icing, everything she does, she just does it from scratch. And she's naturally gifted like that. And so this is something that perhaps she would be able to attend if it's in the off hours, maybe a weekend or weekday evenings. And even persons like me who need to learn how to grow a tree. If perhaps some of the courses are held at off times, I'll be able to access them. And I like the idea that the executive vice chairman would have mentioned in terms of creating opportunities for the elderly. You know, I have a mom who's retired, and indeed, I'd be happy for anything positive for her to engage in. And so for them to be able to come and sit out in the open air, to go back to the days when they would have picked the peas and shelled it. And I think they call it shucking it. All I know is my grandmother had a big straw basket like this, and she just go round and round, up in the air, round and round, up in the air till the peas get all clean. And this is some stuff that our retirees, they could help with. You know, they could sit on a tree or whatever. And we have a lot of elderly persons in our community who have the know-how, who have the skill, who have the time, who have the capacity, who we could put to work. And I don't know how everyone feels about that, but in a way where it's therapeutic. You know, they're out in the open and they're engaging in what they enjoy, and they could get to catch up with each other and talk old-time stories. So however we could engage the elderly and the young persons. I heard about a cadet program. You know, that's excellent. So let the young persons get involved early and learn the field and learn it and want to get into it so that when they graduate, they're already prepared to get right into it in terms of whether they want to do certification or whatever it is. And then, of course, whatever grants in terms of helping farmers and helping fishermen so that they could be able to really get started in their business. And so everything that I hear so far, the food preservation, everything that I hear, the reality that we want to address, the high incidence of non-communicable diseases in our community. And you know all about it. You're very smart, you're talented. And I look forward to where BAMSI is going to go under your leadership. And like I said, the opposition stands ready to support, to work hand in hand, to give guidance. Like you said, persons like Senator Raming, persons like the leader of the opposition. And I guess if you want some paperwork or something done, I could help with it too. But food security, like I said, is a non-partisan issue. It's nothing to do with color, nothing to do with who was the prime minister at the time, nothing to do with which party you support. If we cannot eat, we cannot survive. And as a people, we have to be able to survive. We have to be able to feed ourselves. And we don't want to be so dependent on other countries that we're all tuned into the world news, hoping that they don't strike in this part of the world, hoping that nobody, you know, does anything else like a 911, a 9/11, or, you know, whatever else might have happened, the pandemic and, you know, the containers and the truckers and everything. We're just we're literally watching the news on edge because we don't know if something someone else does miles and miles and miles away from us can impact us tomorrow. And we already saw if the border's shut, how are we going to eat? And this is what we're here to discuss today, okay? Giving BAMSI the autonomy they need to really create more empowerment, to really be able to advance farming, advance agriculture and marine in our country to a point where we can lower our import bill on food and that we could be able to sustain ourselves in a more powerful way so that we can be able to feed ourselves, feed future generations, because this is important, Mr. Vice President. Like I say, it's nonpartisan. So anything I can do to support and anything the opposition can do to support, we stand hand in hand with the government, ready to support the government, just as I support this particular bill that is before the Senate. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
As many
No.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Vice President, fellow senators, good day. Mr. Vice President, fellow senators, good day. I rise on the occasion with a grateful heart, giving thanks to the Almighty God for the opportunity that He has afforded me to stand in this place and contribute to this bill. Mr. Vice President, it is important for us to recognize the architects of the BAMSI institution. This was the brainchild of former Prime Minister Perry Gladstone Christie. This concept was further developed by people like Dr. Godfrey Aeneas and others, and many others, who contributed to this institution. BAMSI was a key part of the government's overall plan to build a more modern and prosperous nation. And I think it's important to recognize that and give the people who contributed their due just. Mr. Vice President, I would like to congratulate Senator Dr. Aricia Hepburn, the newly minted president of BAMSI. Dr. Hepburn is well qualified and able and equipped to head this institution, and I wish her Godspeed. I also wish to congratulate Senator Terrell Young, who is also the executive vice chairman of BAMSI, and I wish him also Godspeed. Mr. Vice President, this new day government has prioritized food security. Mr. Vice President, our blueprint for change lays out the mandate for the benefit, and this is for the benefit of Senator Henfield and also Senator Raming. It lays out the mandate and the priority of the government. And that priority is clearly enshrined in the government's blueprint and its mandate for change. The only thing I would say to Senator Raming is a government must be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. I am always hearing this notion from the opposition senators that, that piece of legislation, this piece of legislation was on the table before we left office. Let's under the table, but it never reached the top of the table to be passed, right? And so, I want to kill this notion, okay? Walk and chew gum at the same time. There was enough technology to move these bills forward. And so I want that to cease, because every single time they stand up to say that, I'm going to defend it. Because let's walk and chew gum at the same time. So let's just stop it right away. Secondly, Mr. Vice President, I also heard the notion that there wasn't a board. And so I just wanted to clarify, for the sake of Senator, my good Senator Seymour, who just presented, that when BAMSI was at its embryonic stage, it operated as a company. In the absence of legislation, the cabinet appointed a board, and the Prime Minister, the Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie, monitored the progress of that institution on a weekly basis. But a board was appointed nonetheless. And I think that's the point. Right? And so I just wanted to clarify that. The thing is, Mr. Vice President, I believe that those who live in glass houses should not throw stones. They should not throw stones. And it would be wise for the senators on the other side who contributed to not throw stones, not be passive aggressive, not have this passive aggressive nature. They want to walk hand in hand with the government on one hand, and then on the other hand, they are throwing boulders, right? I see that as being passive aggressive in nature, and I'm going to call them out on it. And so I just want the opposition senators to be genuine. If you want to work with the government to push through legislation, let's work together. But don't be passive aggressive. Don't live in a glass house and then throw stones, because that's not the way we should move forward. Anyway, I digress. Mr. Vice President, I will move on with my presentation. Mr. Vice President, in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, there for a large part,
Senator Pickstock has the floor. Senators.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, agriculture in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas has been, for the large part, misunderstood, under-evaluated, and every time it takes center stage, it attracts much political posturing and declarations of support and the highest level of commitment of comments despite its squabbles. Mr. Vice President, this sector continues to attract great idealism. Every debate speaks to how lucrative the sector can be. If only we did this or we did that. Yet, the years keep rolling by, the speeches get longer, and the fertile fields are shorter. The harvests are premature, and the Bahamian farmer is at best a chancer and not seen or treated as a serious investor. That's the reality. It behooves me to say that even in the fishing industry, the Spanish well fisherman is treated at a different and a higher standard than the guy with the same size boat and crew in Ragged Island and in Acklands. This is not the Spanish Wells businessman's instinct or doing. It is the inlaid economic prejudice that still pervades this country, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, when BAMSI was first introduced, the country was given some glimmer of hope that all the negatives were about to change. And finally, this nation would rise up from its service mentality and allow this other sector to flourish. For a while, it seemed as if we were on the right track. Then came 2017, and the stop, cancel, and review actors set up their stage for their short-lived curtain call. But look at all of the damage they left behind. This BAMSI bill speaks to the consequential pillars of sectors of this country and will, in my opinion, be one of the core issues of the legislation this place will have presented before it in this session. While this bill seeks to address or reform the executive framework of the Institute and its management and the duties and responsibilities of the board, these administrative details and functions must be put to adequate, proper, and aggressive use if the potential and goal for our agricultural and marine sectors are to be met, and the training, codification, technical assistance, and economic viability of farmers and fishermen, who, by the way, are the true investors in this sector, are to finally realize a sustainable and profitable sector, Mr. Vice President. I support this bill, Mr. Vice President. Now, I am required to share my opinions and advice to persons who will be charged to certain performances under this bill, to what is required, what is expected, what is demanded, and what should not be tolerated, in my humble opinion, by the Bahamian people. I've heard so many catchphrases associated with this debate: food security, proper diet, or nutritional food, formalization of training in the sector, etc. I think we have to agree that after many years of lackluster failure in this sector, BAMSI is a breath of fresh air in a very congested, non-performing local sector. Mr. Vice President, I can tell you that I look forward with great expectation to the former F&M cabinet minister's performance in this portfolio on his recent watch. After all, he came with marvelous qualifications in the field and a CV which said this was his passion. And long last, maybe the F&M, which traditionally walked all over the sector, will finally get it right, Mr. Vice President. Thank heaven a higher power did not allow the F&M cabinet minister to pull a full 5-year term in office. The 3.5 years he spent there can just be summed up as just another $5 ticket show at one of his annual political comedy skits, for which he was more recognizable.
The chair recognizes Senator Henfield.
Mr. Vice President, the rules of this place and the other place forbid personal attacks. There's no need to attack the former minister personally. There were many dynamics involved in his work, and as a former minister, I can tell you, sometimes things just go differently than you
Senator,
anticipate.
can you clarify what was?
Well, the speaker has set out and really called the former minister a comedian. You know,
From what I recall,
yeah.
he said it was a
but
ticket to one of his comedy shows.
Not in this context, right? It's improper and it ought not to happen. There's no need for personal.
What is the impropriety?
Make your assailing the character and personality of the former Minister of Agriculture.
No, I did not.
From what I understood,
there's no need for that type of vitriol. You know, you're very bright. Yeah, you can make your contribution without doing stuff like that, man. There's no need for that.
Senator Pickstock, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So, Vice President, as I said, thank heavens, a higher power did not allow the F&M cabinet minister to pull a full 5-year term in office. The former F&M cabinet minister with responsibility for this sector gave his best Wesley Snipe mimic performance as he made fabulous speeches, jostled with his hands, played his best Warby Parker wore his best Warby Parker glasses, and delivered practice lines. Mr. Vice President, you may recall this cabinet minister said the sector could create an industry worth $200 million for local investors. Farmers could take out $200 million out of the chunk of $1 billion we spend annually on import for food. The F&M minister.
Senator Henfield, Senator Pickstock has the floor. Senator Henfield, are you standing on a point of order?
And waved. I will repeat that point, Mr. Vice President. He said that farmers could take out $200 million out of the chunk of $1 billion we spend annually to import our food. The F&M minister for this sector stood on the floor and waved his arms and spoke in his best Wesley Snipes voice. He delivered his lines with classic bravado, and then he went back to the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources and did absolutely nothing. The stage in which this country was paying him to perform and do his job was simply for him curtains. A curtain, simply curtain calls to him. The only time you heard from the F&M minister again was when it was a curtain call again in the Parliament, and he could enter at stage left and put on his grandstanding performance. He did nothing, while the now departed chairman of BAMSI under the former F&M administration whittled it down to a non-performing entity. We did not even hear from the minister when it came down to sacking or firing, as we would say, his parliamentary colleague from BAIC. Mr. Vice President, I make these comments because too much time has already been wasted and squandered on the direction of this country, or the direction of which this country should go. And I have been on since BAMSI was first conceived and began its critical trek in this country. 4 years has been lost already. Mistakes were already made. Mr. Vice President, you would recall that another member of the F&M cast of actors used the other plays to disparage Bamsey at its outset. This actor used as his props the very crops grown at Bamsey, which he displayed in contrast to similar imported American produce. That circus performer thought it to be so cute to belittle and downgrade the Bahamian crop, which he had selectively chosen to make his most unpatriotic point. This performance by that F&M official was best played out after he assumed high office, and when farmers united and came to his office to see him to complain about his detachment and ask for help, the cameras showed the world the F&M character leaving through the back door of the Cecil Wallace Whitfield building, getting into his official car and driving past the nation's farmers in the parking lot as he waved them goodbye. Mr. Vice President, a colleague reminded me after hearing comments made in the other place that this issue about a state visit a political executive made to the Republic of Haiti. Upon returning home to Nassau, the political leader announced he had signed an agreement to bring bananas from Haiti to the Bahamas. No concern whatsoever for the hard-pressed Bahamian banana farmer, and no legislative or policy action to remedy the overrun of South American bananas to our country at the detriment of the Bahamian farmer. Mr. Vice President, I wonder who is laughing now, but it is time to move on. These stories must be told so that we do not repeat what was done. Mr. Vice President, in many ways, our world and realities in this country so often clash. Our proximity to the developed United States of America, our oversaturation with American food products in the agricultural and marine sector, poultry, beef and pork, packaged food, so easily available, has preconditioned us, Mr. Vice President. We are so preconditioned that here in the sovereign Bahamas, we find it necessarily essential in the marketplace to actually promote the term and concept by Bahamian. It is as if we are called upon to do the Bahamian grown product a special favor, Mr. Vice President. This preconditioning is not of our own making. It is the bane of colonialism. It is its mercantile assembly and outreach. The colonizer, having denuded us of whatever natural resources we possessed as our patrimony, then set out to turn us into the mass consumer of its products and materials. The story must be told, Mr. Vice President. How do we truly fathom the reality that we are 700 islands, rocks, and keys with varying climates and conditions for a huge assortment of lucrative crops, yet we are importing canned pigeon peas and onions, and our chicken make a long flight from Brazil and other distant ports, Mr. Vice President? Something must be wrong. There is this other reality which harms the concept and the fundamentals of a strong agricultural and marine food sector. It is the astronomical cost of food. Mr. Vice President, the harsh truth of the matter here is one can order the most expensive steak on the menu at Wolfgang Puck's restaurant in New York, or from Omaha Steak in the mail, and fly the meal here for dinner or lunch, and the odds are you will still pay far less for that steak dish than what a Bahamian will be asked to pay for a whole medium-sized grouper caught in Bahamian waters by Bahamians for Sunday family meal. These stark contrasts, Mr. Vice President, have to meet somewhere in the middle. The price for Bahamian lobster to Bahamian is not calculated on the fact that it is caught by Bahamians in Bahamian waters and brought to the Bahamian shorelines, but rather it seems that the price is generated by what the export price is. Should I have to pay for lobster what the Italian in Rome is prepared to spend on his Bahamian food luxury? Mr. Vice President, these two worlds cannot continue to exist if the Bahamian people are going to be asked to give their fullest support to the strengthening and protecting of these sectors. And why should he, when his wallet and circumstances is spurned in favor of the export dollar? Mr. Vice President, I said colonialism brings us to this juncture. Let me develop this point, this argument. You can go online to Amazon and order a revisionist book called, and I quote, A Short History of the Bahamas. It is written by a former high school principal from England, I am told, who was in the Bahamas in 1959. The book makes a very serious claim very early in its less than 60-page hit job. I have ordered the book, and I apologize for not being able to lay it on the table, but I gave my undertaking to do so at the earliest undertaking. I am told by a senior Bahamian, most of them scholars, that this book, written by A. Dean Peggs, book states that the soil in the Bahamas is not good for growing anything. I repeat, this book promotes and indicates that the soil in the Bahamas is not good for growing anything. Mr. Vice President, this book, for a very long period, prior to independence, I am advised, was part of the Bahamian high school curriculum. Mr. Vice President, when you tell hundreds of teenage students that their land and their soil is worthless and agriculture is not sustainable, you create a specific society with specific reasoning. We hear so much about the tourism industry and Stafford Sands, who was put on the controversial Bahamian $10 bill. And we are told how he influenced for the better our economic structure by taking us off the British pound and pegging the new Bahamian currency to the United States equivalent 100 cents to our dollar. What we are not told is how this very same tourism industry paved the way for the saturation of foreign products into the colony of the Bahamas, Bahama Islands, and the wealth of the merchant oligarch. Mr. Vice President, one must remember that long before Dane Peggs put pen to paper, the pineapple industry in the Bahamas was the world's treasure. It would take the U.S. annexation of Hawaii to retard our pineapple fields in the 1940s. Mr. Vice President, how did Winn-Dixie or City Meat Market make its landfall in the Bahamas? Who were its true Bahamian owners? How did the UBP merchants like Galvanas and Pritchard's, Shepherds, and the list goes on, get their wholesale businesses jump-started, Mr. Vice President? All of these enterprises were done at a tremendous price or cost to Bahamian farmers. The American product, in its delightful packaging and its cute little jingles on radio advertisement, was the funeral beat for the Bahamian farmer. Mr. Vice President, there are many people listening to me right now who can relate to these jingles. Jingles like, when it's Libby's, 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 on the label, 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 you can trust it on your table. Or ho, 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 from the valley, green giant. Mr. Vice President, Count Bernardino, the late entertainer, put City Meat Market on the map with his still memorable advertising jingle. While we are enjoying these modern delights, the Bahamian farmer was catching hell. Okra no longer came from the fruit and vegetable vendor at Potterski Dock, the mailboat, or the produce exchange. It came in a frozen package stamped Stokely's. We can remember the Sawyer family and the Aubrey family and their pioneering efforts with tomato paste and pigeon peas. My dad tells me that at one time, Sawyer's had pig feet in the can, all from Bahamian products. Go into the supermarket today, and the green or dry pigeon peas has a Spanish reversible label. Years ago, when we believed in Bahamian products, no Bahamian family ventured to the kitchen on Christmas Day without a pint of 2 or freshly shelled green Bahamian pigeon peas. When you went through the market at Jumbe Village or at Potterski Dock or at any of the popular fruit and vegetable vendors on the street or at the government produce exchange, there were tons and tons of green pigeon peas and vendors and their children happily shelling peas. Mr. Vice President, don't blame the farmer from Peru or Guatemala if he gets his peas into a can and you don't have to eat cautiously because you don't have to worry about biting into a pebble. This is where BAMSI must take the country. Through full and thorough modernization, BAMSI must continue to have at its core the following components as originally envisioned: academic and training, tutorial commercial farming, research and development, and associated farmers and the outreach program, Mr. Vice President. BAMSI must develop and promote the new highest levels of food production. And I do believe that BAMSI will, under the leadership of Dr. Hepburn, will reach and achieve those lofty goals. Mr. Vice President, there is so much work to be done. Just recently, we had the serious salmonella scare in the country over onions from another Central American country. Mr. Vice President, if my memory is correct, it is under the former Minister V. Alfred Gray's term in office as Minister of Agriculture that thousands of dollars was invested in onion packing houses throughout the country. What happened, Mr. Vice President? Where did they go? 4 years of stop, cancel, and review. And now along comes the onion salmonella poisoning scare. I remember, Mr. Vice President, when Bahamians spoke about Gladstone Road, your thoughts were about the Nutt family, N-U-T-T family, and their modern and vast chicken farm. An entire generation is growing up who will only know that site as a fuel station, all gone. We traded in our industry and the thrift and faith of our farmers to foreign wholesalers, taking advantage of colonial mercantile systems to still own our economy and make us pay for it. We heard all those wonderful stories about the huge ships that arrived in Abaco to pick up the locally growing citrus oranges, tangerines, limes, and grapefruit. The same citrus fruits flows back to us or sail back to us under the label of Florida orange juice. And we are happy campers and consumers. Mr. Vice President, my mother tells me that the most exciting field trip of her primary school experience would have been a trip to the Golden Isles Farms on Golden Isles Road, where a modern dairy raised cows, and produce locally fresh milk and dairy products for the market. But the mercantile colonial system to which we seem so chained, tied, and bound found a way to bring MacArthur's milk and Borden's to a Bahamian industry, and a Bahamian industry bites the dust for it. So here we are today with the BAMSI legislation and all of the honorifics we wish to apply and all of the idealism we wish to sell to a dream. The fact of the matter is, we like curry mutton, and there are more wild goats per capita in the Bahamas, on Long Key, in the Michael Southern Bahamas chain, than they have in the South American Andes mountains. But our mutton, Mr. Vice President, comes in here with a label, made in New Zealand. I repeat, our mutton comes here with a made in New Zealand label. A former F&M Minister of Agriculture reportedly got involved also, Mr. Vice President, in large-scale guava farming in Andros. Here again, another Bahamian crop that farmers had as a mainstay. All gone, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, before I sit down, I wish to pause for a few minutes to look at what was once a thriving farming industry in Eleuthera, which put the community of Hatchet Bay on the world map. And then it too died. Mr. Vice President, Austin Levy, some of you may remember, the American industrialist, saw the potential of the fertile land of Hatchet Bay in Eleuthera, and he took advantage of it. Farmers in Eleuthera got a fair price for their products, which Hatchet Bay Plantation purchased. For more than 40 years, the Austin Levy farm model worked in our Bahamas and employed hundreds of Bahamians. Hatchet Bay produced fresh milk, ice cream, chickens, and fruits and vegetables. The lack of affirmative action by governments of the day to protect the Bahamian farmer from the foreign interloper, using as his entry point the major food store chains and food wholesalers, led to the death of Hatchet Bay. Their business model built depots, or what was called milk stands, all over Nassau, where housewives could get for their milk, eggs, poultry, and garden variety stuff. When the Austin Levy family tanked under the weight of foreign competition, and the Bahamian farmer, Mr. Vice President, also died. Mr. Vice President, the history of the period is ripe with editorials from the Tribune and Nassau Guardian criticizing the government of the day for its investment and takeover of the Hatchet Bay plantation. It will be for the historians of tomorrow to assess the ideology of the administration of that day and what their interest and investment did to shore up the fault line for hundreds of Bahamian farmers. Eventually, the government had to close the doors. This cannot be taken lightly. Government's role has not changed. BAMSI is a bold and provocative statement and stand. It is still on training wheels. We saw a former prime minister stand in the parliament and excoriate the BAMSI crop against the foreign produce. How shameful. Mr. Vice President, this revolution in food security and providing a safety economic net, training facility, network for the nation's investment in food developers from the soil and water will require more than just legislation, Mr. Vice President. It will require some sacrifices. BAMSI is not about and should not be about another tier of government service where the public purse shells out salaries. The people who are in charge with the responsibility for BAMSI have their hands on the pen of history. Madam President, we know and we wish you well. You have an awesome responsibility, and you yourself, Madam President, along with your team, have your hands on the pen of history. I continue and I wish you well. It is to their steadfastness and brilliance and capacity to understand the vagaries of our system and to get the job done that BAMSI, indeed, Mr. Vice President, will succeed. Their job will determine what is written on the pages of history. There will be many suggestions, just like how I'm making my own today. However, Mr. Vice President, the work, the success, the future will largely depend on the BAMSI team. I offer the BAMSI team again, starting with the President and the Executive Vice Chairman and the board, my best wishes for success and the realization of the goal to which this nation aspires in food security and to anchor the agricultural and fisheries sector. Mr. Vice President, there are F&M farmers and fishermen, DNA farmers and fishermen, Jehovah's Witness farmers and fishermen, PLP farmers and fishermen. BAMSI must put on blinkers. It must not see party colors or demand party loyalty for its services. We must let the 49th year of our national independence spur us to that lofty goal. Mr. Vice President, let's get this nation ready for a food revolution. I support this legislation, Mr. Vice President.
As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Halkitis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I will be brief in my wrapping up. And I want to once again thank all senators for their contributions to this debate. I think the contributions were uplifting and relevant and informed and passionate. A few points, Mr. Speaker. Senator Henfield expressed his support for the reinvigoration of agriculture and harkened back to the old days. And he called for linkages to the tourism industry, which will form a form of diversification, and encourage BAMSI to work with the RBDF, use data analytics and other modern tools to protect our marine resources, and find a way that we can make economic use of some of our traditionally unexploited resources. Senator Raming expressed that some mistakes were made, but that we need to look forward. Expressed the importance of maintenance and getting young people involved in farming, and the fact that our resources are limited and we must make maximum use of them. I must say, just in reference to something that Senator Raming said about BAMSI approaching a cost of $100 million, and just reflect that former Prime Minister Christie, envisioning BAMSI, made the statement that if his predecessor could spend $100 million on the roads, he must be able to spend $100 million in Andros. And I think that was his view, to express the importance of Andros. Senator Hepburn, the incoming president, laid out her vision. Obviously, she's very excited to take up this position at the school. Senator Ellis reflected on the important role that women in farming had traditionally played, and that sentiment was echoed by Senator Roel Turner, who both of them expressed the need for us to really concentrate in getting more women involved in agriculture, which they have traditionally been. And Senator Roel Turner encouraged BAMSI to recognize the history of East Grand Bahama as an agricultural community and the fitness of its land. I think Senator Roll Turner coined a new phrase. He said, yes, you have backyard farming, but let's move to residential agriculture, which is in keeping with his point, the point that he made that, in the old days, if you were in school and they put you in agriculture, that was a tremendous stigma. But nowadays, it is not so because we see more of the value of it, and hopefully BAMSI will help us to see more of that. Senator Seymour expressed that the former administration were not neglectful sitters, but in fact, they did do some of the heavy lifting in bringing some of the structure to BAMSI in terms of putting the board in place, which is a step forward, and also the importance of making sure that we address production and distribution in an effort to bring down the cost of food, and perhaps let's revisit the breadbasket and the taxation regime so that we can bring the prices down. Senator Pickstock, in his usual eloquent and passionate way, took us down, gave us a historical perspective on production, and he challenged us to emancipate ourselves from the thinking that foreign is better and embrace our Bahamian products, because we have done it in the past, that we were able to produce to the point of even exporting. And so we must, as he constantly admonishes us, learn to walk and chew gum at the same time. Mr. Vice President, the debate is now over and we will walk out of this place. And as we said in the debate, we have had various instances in our recent history where we pledged we're going to diversify, we're going to grow, we're going to concentrate on agriculture. As we leave, Mr. Vice President, I want to leave us with a few words spoken by the late Selin O'Pinling at the Progressive Liberal Party's 26th Annual Convention, Friday, 30th November, 1981. And I hope that we can take some of these words with us so that what we have spoken about here today are not just words that disappear when we dissipate, when we leave. He says, in the Western Bahamas, there's Andros, the Andros which Clarence Bain called the continent to the west. It has the most fertile soil in the Bahamas. It is richly endowed with freshwater resources. It sits on the richest fishing grounds in the nation, and it guards the shipping lanes to and from Florida. As we look to the new frontier, we are forced to admit that Andros could hold the future of our country in its hands. The first main drawback to the economic development of Andros was its inaccessibility by large boats due to the reef that runs all the way along its eastern coastline. The second drawback was its lack of natural deep harbors. The third drawback was its separation by broad creeks. The water barging project from Morgan's Bluff made a deep harbor necessary, and one has now been dug out of the hardest rock in the bed of the sea anywhere in the Bahamas. The reef is now recognized as an asset rather than a hindrance to development. The creeks no longer pose a problem. 4 bridges span the main ones, the ecology of which is necessary for the preservation of the inshore fishing grounds. And he said, I have a dream that one day the capital of the Bahamas will sit on the broad plains of Andros. New Providence will boast our financial capital, Grand Bahama will host our industrial capital, and Andros will nurture our political capital with much more land to spare. Her rich soils will be the breadbasket of the Bahamas, and her cooling waters will soothe many a dry throat. As Florida's frost line moves further south, as more and more farmland in Florida is eaten up by the expansion of her cities and the growth of her population, as its land becomes scarcer, the farmlands of Andros will come under economic use for the primary production of and the manufacture of food products, not only for domestic consumption, but also for export. Her rejuvenated pine lands will not in future be used to make paper in America or prop up coal mines in Britain. Instead, they will be used to base an industry at home that will provide our people not only with work, but with building materials. The sap from the pine trees will turn into turpentine. From her rich banks and deep sea troughs, we will mine the gold of the sea and manufacture and process on the spot fish and fish products, both for the local and international market. The rich mud on her western coast will make beauty packs for our women and provide a raw material base for our paints. In her many creeks, sheltered from the large marauding fish of the open sea, fish farms would be developed for shrimp and other high-protein seafood. Her rich conch beds will be turned into factories of jewels, producing rare cultured pearls like the Japanese did with their oyster beds. Her broad, swathing beaches will give rise to tourist resorts rivaling anything in Nassau or Freeport. A new frontier beckons and Andres for another 50,000 Bahamians. Those words were spoken 41 years ago, Mr. Vice President, and many of those sentiments were echoed here today in this debate. And in closing, as we move this bill, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, let us all hope that it's not another 41 years before we see the realizations of some of these sentiments expressed by the late Sir Lyndon in 1981. And so with that, Mr. Vice President, I thank everyone once again for their input into the debate. And I move that the question be now put.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the establishment, incorporation, governance, control, and administration by a board of the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute and for matters incidental thereto. As many are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for the establishment, incorporation, governance, control, and administration by a board of the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute and for matters incidental thereto.
Further second reading of bills?
There are none, Mr. Vice President.
If there are no further second reading of bills, Committee of the Whole?
Mr. Vice President, I move that the Senate do now resolve itself into a Committee of the Whole with Senator Darren Pickstock in the chair.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock in the chair. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The Senate will now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole in the chair.
Six. Senator presiding. So we got it. Yeah.
Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the long title of a bill for an act to provide for the establishment, incorporation, governance, control, and administration by a board of the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute and for matters incidental thereto, the long title be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Senator Rule.
All right. It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. The short title is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 to 15 be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 2 and 15 of the bill be agreed. 2 through 15 be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the schedule be now agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety, it has been moved and seconded that the schedule, I beg your pardon, be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. This motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be agreed in its entirety.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Vice President do now take the chair.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Vice President do now take the chair. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The motion is carried. Mr. Vice President will now take the chair. Mr. Vice President, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has examined the bill, having made no amendments thereto.
Honorable Senators, Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has examined the bill, having made no amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I move that a bill for an act for the establishment, incorporation, governance, control, and administration by a board of the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute and for matters incidental thereto be read a third time and passed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. Ordered that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for the establishment, incorporation, governance, control, and administration by a board of the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute and for matters incidental thereto.
Ordered that the bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute Act 2022. Further third reading of bills. Ordered that the clerk do take the bill passed to the House today to His Excellency the Governor General for his favorable consent. Consideration of House amendments, resolutions, discharge of select committees, notices for future meetings, orders for clerk,
No, renew notices.
notices for future meetings,
Mr. Vice President, I would like to renew all notices in the name of the government.
so noted. Orders for clerk, adjournment,
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I move that the Senate at its rising do adjourn sine die.
is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate at its rising do adjourn sine die. As many are in favor will say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is carried. Final adjournment.
Mr. Vice President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now adjourn. As many are in favor will say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The Senate stands adjourned.